Well, I was a child in Poland and I lived through the war years there. But I came to this country in 1951 and I've lived ever since here.
Okay, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's okay. What is that you're most interested in?
Give us, well, two things. I guess one, if you could, I was reading, so tell me a little bit about what you went through. I was reading you weren't in a concentration camp, but just tell me a little bit about what you went through during the war.
That's right. Well, it all depends, where you come from. I come from Eastern Poland, and Eastern Poland, the Nazis did not come to us until 1941, on June 22nd, I think it was. And so my time under the Nazi occupation was 3 years. I was also liberated a little earlier because of where I lived. And that area is referred to as the killing fields. The Germans did not send the Jews to concentration camps. They simply came in and they shot them all. These were the lucky ones that they shot. The ones that they singled out, if they were communists or anything else, they tortured them to death. And so I lived through the first 15 months in my own little town, where I saw all the Jews almost. About 10%, we were lucky, about 10% survived the war, but that's an exception because of the circumstances. After they killed everyone, they singled out only useful Jews. And since my mother was useful to them as a seamstress, so they kept her alive a little bit longer. And then it just happened by accident. We didn't know. The Russian partisans attacked the town in which we were incarcerated in the ghetto, and they tried to destroy the German garrison. And at the same time, they came in, there was one Jewish partisan, and when he saw that the doors of the ghetto were locked, he broke the lock because it was a very small ghetto. They called it for useful Jews only. And it's a very small ghetto. And he says, this is your chance. He says, if we don't run away tomorrow, they will kill you all for the fact that we attacked them. He says, run quickly and go through the swamps into the forest, and somebody will tell you where to go. And we found ourselves, my parents, with 4 more siblings. The youngest child was 1.5 years old, my mother's baby, who was born just 10 days before Nazi Germany attacked the Soviet Union. And we found ourselves in the forest without any help, without any warm clothing, without anything. And we had to survive till the end of the war. For exactly 20 months. November 1st, 1942, we escaped into the forest and we were liberated July 4th, 1944. So you see, I consider myself a very lucky survivor. I was only 3 years. The war went on for another year. It's not until May 1945 that Germany surrendered. And we were liberated almost a year earlier. But in those 3 years, we went through what most people in our area did. It's either you're shot when they don't need you, or whether they need your services, they'll let you live a little bit longer. And I was lucky because of my parents' skills and that incident of escaping into the forest. This was the only case that I know of where a whole group of people have really escaped from a small ghetto and into the forest.
And how old were you?
When the Nazis came, I was 10 years old. When we escaped into the forest, I was 11 and a half. And when I was liberated, I was 13.
Did you guys come to New York?
No, not right away. We lived in displaced persons camps in Germany, in the American zone. And that's where we started our education. Don't forget, we lost 3 years of schooling while we were under the Nazi occupation, so we had to make up the time. And so they created schools for us. That's where we started. And then, of course, when we came to the United States, we continued.
And where did you come to in the United States first?
Well, my first stop was in Canada, to be honest with you, because the quota for people like us was so long that we would have to wait. We already were sick and tired of being in those camps. we would have had to wait a long time. And we had some friends in Canada, and they said, we will send you papers, and maybe Canada is not that far from the United States. Maybe you will want to come here. And we did. So we were for 3 years in Canada, and then we came to the United States.
And where did you come to in the U.S.?
In the United States?
Yeah.
Wherever everybody else comes, Brooklyn.
What neighborhood?
We were talking 4th Street, I remember, on the east side on 4th Street. 279 East 4th Street. I still remember the address for some reason.
That's okay. Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, it was a a big time.
And then we moved to near Eastern Parkway, St. John's Place.
Got it. Okay. So, you said you're almost 88, or you are 88?
In 2 weeks.
In 2 weeks, you'll be 88. Being everything that you and your family went through, and what happened this past year, how did that impact you in terms of the shooting at the Tree of Life Synagogue and seeing a rise in swastikas?
I never thought, when we came to the United States, we thought that this was the greatest country in the world. And to this day, I would give my life for America, because I found my freedom here in this wonderful, country. This is a temporary thing. I think it will blow over. As long as it's brought to the people's attention, what it needs is more education, going out to the places where this hatred exists, and see whether we could influence them somehow. Because as I mentioned earlier there, I don't know whether you heard me, I too was filled with hate after the war. Towards the people that have done such terrible injustices for us. And it is the wisdom of my father, who was a very kind and smart man. And when he heard me say that I hate everyone in the free world who did nothing to help us, because we were in such a desperate, situation, he pointed out to me and he said, I don't like what you're doing. He says, hatred will eat you up and you will destroy your own life. We were hated. Did you like it? I said, no, I hated it. So he says, then why would you do it to others? Why would you? They don't know that you hate them, but you'll destroy your life. Do the opposite. Teach people kindness through your own behavior, acceptance and tolerance towards others, and then you'll be a lot more influential than by hating somebody. And I listened to him, and it took some time. And when I started to speak in schools, because I was a teacher by profession, and after I retired, I saw there was a great need to educate the younger people. So I go from school to school, and I not only share my story, but I teach them to overcome the hatred that they feel. Because don't think that every school is so liberal and kind here. I've spoken in a school once where the teachers did not let me walk out to my car by myself. I said, why? It's in the daytime, I'm not afraid. And they say, because this is Ku Klux Klan country. We don't want you to go by yourself just in case there's somebody in the parking lot. So and that is just a few miles away from where I live, mind you. So these kind of things happen, but the need is great. And even though I'm old, I can barely stand on my feet. When I go out to a school, I was in a school this week, last Tuesday, and I felt so dizzy. So I said, I'm going to continue with my program, but you have to give me a chair. I will have to do it sitting down. I don't have the energy to stand up for an hour.
Got it. Okay, is there anything specific you want people to know on this Holocaust Remembrance Day?
We should never forget it, and not only the Jewish people. We should not let the world forget what's happened, because what happened to my people can happen to anyone else. Hatred is such a terrible thing. And when we started discriminating against one group of people, then you know the famous saying from in the Holocaust Museum. First they came for, what is his name? No, 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 not Elie Wiesel. I always quote him, and it'll come to me. That what happens when you get to be 88. He says first they came for the communists and I didn't speak up, and then they came for the trade unionists and I didn't speak up, and then they came for the Jews, I didn't speak up, and then they came for me, and there was no one to speak anymore. Now I tell the students what a powerful lesson there is. We must speak up when we see an injustice done. If we don't speak up, then our own rights diminish eventually. And if we want this country to stay strong and democratic, we must speak up when we see injustices done.